Second story. A little boy and a little girl. In the big town, where there are so many houses and people that there isn't room enough for everyone to have a little garden, and where most people must therefore be content with flowers in flower pots, there lived two poor children who had a garden somewhat bigger than a flower pot. They weren't brother and sister, but they loved each other almost as much as if they had been. Their parents lived next to each other in two garrets, where the roof of one neighbor's house joined that of the other, with a gutter running between them. In each house was a little window. All you had to do to get from one window to the other to step across the gutter. Outside each window, the parents had placed a big wooden box, in which they grew the vegetables they used, and a little rose bush. There was one rose bush in each box, and they grew beautifully. One day, the parents decided to place the boxes across the gutter, so that they nearly reached from one window to another, and looked like just two walls of flowers. Sweet peas hung over the boxes, and the rose bushes sent out long shoots, which clustered around the windows and bent towards each other. It was almost like a triumphal arch of flowers and leaves. Because the boxes were very high, and the children knew that they must not climb on them, they were often allowed to go out onto the roof behind the boxes and sit on their stools under the roses. There they could play to their heart's content. Winter brought an end to this amusement. The windows often frosted over. But then the children warmed coins on the stove and held them against the frosted pane. This made a lovely round peephole, and out of each peeped a bright, friendly eye, one from each window. It was the little boy and the little girl. His name was Kay, and hers was Gerda. In summer, they could get to each other in one jump, but in the winter they had to go down and up many stairs while the snow was falling outside. "It is the white bees that are swarming," said the old grandmother. "Do they also have a queen bee?" asked the little boy, for he knew each hive had one. "Yes, they do," said grandmother. "She always flies where they swarm thickest. She is the largest of them all and never settles on the earth, but flies up again into the black sky. Many a winter night she flies through the streets of the town and looks into the windows, and then they freeze immediately and look like flowers." "Yes, I have seen that," both the children said, so they knew that it was true. "Can the Snow Queen come in here?" asked the little girl. "Let her try," said the boy. "I'll put her on a hot stove, and then she'll melt." But the grandmother smoothed his hair and told him some more tales. In the evening, when Kay was at home and half undressed, he climbed up on a chair by the window and looked out through the little hole. A few flakes of snow were falling outside, and one of them, the largest of all, settled on the edge of one of the flower boxes. The snowflake grew larger and larger, until at last it became a maiden clothed in the finest white gauze made of millions of star-like flakes. She was beautiful and delicate, but of ice, of blinding, sparkling ice. Yet she was alive. Her eyes flashed like two bright stars, but there was no peace or rest in them. She nodded toward the window and beckoned with her hand. The little boy was affrighted and jumped down from the chair. At the same moment it seemed as if a large bird flew by outside the window. Next day it was clear and frosty. Then came the thaw, and with it the spring. The sun shone, the green shoots appeared, the swallows built their nests, The windows were opened, and the little children sat in their garden again, high up on a roof at the top of the house. How beautifully the roses bloomed that summer! The little girl learned a hymn in which there was something about roses, which made her think of her own roses. So she sang it to the little boy, and he sang too. Roses fade and die, but we, our infant Lord, shall surely see. And the two children held each other's hands, kissed the roses, and looked up at God's bright sunshine and spoke to it, as if the Christ child were there. What lovely summer days those were! How beautiful it was out there by the sweet rose bushes, which seemed as if they would never stop blooming. Kay and Gerda sat and looked at the picture book of beasts and birds. It was then, exactly as the clock struck 5 in the great church tower, that Kay said, "Oh, something has stabbed my heart, and now something has got into my eye." The little girl put her arms around his neck. He blinked his eyes, but no, there was nothing at all to be seen. "I think it is gone," said he, but it was not gone. It was one of those splinters of glass from the mirror, Goblin's mirror, that we remember so well, the ugly glass that made everything great and good seem small and hideous, while the mean and the wicked things became distinct and large, and every fault could be seen at once. Poor little Kay had also received a splinter right in his heart, which would soon become like a lump of ice. It did not hurt him any more, but the splinter was still there. "Why are you crying?" he asked. "You look ugly like that." "There is nothing the matter with me. Oh, look!" he cried suddenly. "That rose is worm-eaten, and this one is crooked. They're ugly roses, after all, like the box they stand in." And he kicked the box with his foot and tore off both of the roses. "Kay, what are you doing?" cried the little girl. And seeing her dismay, he tore off another rose and jumped in through his own window away from dear little Gerda. Afterwards, when she came with her picture book, he said it was only fit for babies. When grandmother told stories, he was always sure to put in a "but." Whenever he could, he would get behind her, put on a pair of glasses, and imitate her, which he did perfectly, and people laughed at him. Soon he could mimic the voice and walk of everybody in the street. Everything that was peculiar or ugly about them, Kay would imitate. And people said, "He must certainly have a remarkable head, that boy." But it was the glass that had gotten into his eye, the glass that had lodged in his heart, that made him do it, and even made him tease little Gerda, who loved him with all her heart. His games now became quite different from what they had been before. They became quite serious and sensible. One winter's day, when the snow was falling, he came out with a magnifying glass, held up the tail of his blue coat, and let the snowflakes fall upon it. "Now look through the glass, Gerda," he said. Every flake of snow was magnified and looked like a lovely flower or a star with 10 points. It was beautiful to behold. "Look," said Kay. "They're much more interesting than real flowers. They're perfect until they begin to melt." Soon after, Kay came out wearing thick gloves and with his sled on his back. He shouted into Gerda's ear, I've got a permission to go to the main square where the other boys play. And off he went. In the big square, the boldest boys often tied their sleds to the country people's carts and were pulled along a good way with them. It was great fun. At the height of their game, a big sled came along. It was painted red with white markings, and in it sat somebody wrapped in a rough white fur and wearing a rough white cap. The sled drove twice around the square, and Cain managed to fasten his little sled to it, and away he went. It went faster and faster, straight into the next street. The driver turned around and nodded in a friendly way to Kay, as if they knew each other. Every time Kay wanted to cast loose his sled, the stranger nodded again, and so Kay stayed where he was, until at last they drove out through the town gate. Then the snow began to fall so fast that the boy could not see his hand in front of him, but still on he went. Then he finally dropped the rope to get loose from the big sled, but it was no use, for his little sled was bound fast to the other, and on they went like the wind. Then he called out loudly, but nobody heard him, and the snow fell fast, and the sled flew on. Every now and then it gave a jump, and they seemed to be flying over hedges and ditches. The boy was terribly frightened. He wanted to say his prayers, but all he could remember were multiplication tables. The snowflakes became larger and larger until at last they looked like big white birds. All at once they flew aside, and the big sled stopped, and the person who had driven it stood up. The fur and the cap were made of snow. It was a lady, so tall and slender, all glittering white. It was the Snow Queen. "We have traveled fast," she said, "but you are shivering with cold. Creep under my bearskin." And she put him beside her in her own sled and wrapped her fur around him. He felt as if he were sinking into a snowdrift. "Are you still cold?" she asked. And then she kissed him on the forehead. Oh, that kiss was colder than ice. It went right through to his heart, half of which was already a lump of ice. He felt as if he were going to die, but only for a moment. Then he felt fine again and did not notice the cold any more. "My sled! Don't forget my sled!" That was the first thing he thought of, for it was fastened to one of the white fowls that flew behind them with the sled on its back. The Snow Queen kissed Kay once more, and then he forgot little Gerda and his grandmother and everyone at home. "Now you shall have no more kisses," she said, "for I could kiss you to death." Kay looked at her. She was so beautiful. He could not imagine a wiser or more lovely face. She did not appear to be made of ice now, as if she had when she had sat outside the window and beckoned to him. In his eyes she was perfect. He did not feel afraid at all. He told her he could do arithmetic up to fractions, and that he knew the number of square miles and population of all the countries. And as he talked, she smiled. It seemed to him that what he knew was not enough, and he looked up into the vast, endless space. And she flew with him high on a black cloud, and the storm blew and whistled. It seemed as though the wind sang old songs. They flew over the forests and lakes, over land and sea. Beneath them the cold wind roared, the wolves howled, the snow glistened. Above them black screaming crows flew, but above all the moon shone bright and clear, and Kay gazed at it through the long, long winter night. By day he slept at the feet of the Snow Queen.